the concepts here are how you get three-dimensional forms and how you move shaping around and what that looks like on a flat pattern. So that can come up in menswear as well. So the techniques and the concepts are transferable. Bit of fabric that's flat, and how do we get it to fit around this shape? And once we do that, then what are our options for what we call darts? You know, we're going to look today at moving our position of the darts around and some of the boundaries around that. Okay, so say I have this bit of fabric and it's flat. Okay, it's like a piece of paper, and it's straight, but I'm going to put this onto the stand. I'm going to get it to wrap around this form. So this is our center front line here on our dress stand, and here is our straight of grain on this little bit of fabric. So I'm going to place this along, and I'm just going to pin in just to hold it in place. Okay, so I've pinned it along there and it's flat, and now I'm going to place it down like this. So I've already cut the corner off this one, and then I've cut into it so that it will sit around the neckline there nicely, and so you can see the way the fabric is falling. Now what I'm going to do to try and get it into a three-dimensional form is I'm going to see that it's sitting there pretty nicely there. It's not going to be completely bed on, there's going to be little bits of space. But if I go like that and I pinch a shape here like that, doesn't that sit on the stand, the fabric now, around that three-dimensional shape pretty well? So that wedge shape there creates a three-dimensional shape. So that's what we call our dart, and that's the block there. That's the one that I've kind of just pinched in. Okay. The concept we're going to look at here is dart manipulation. So it's moving this allowance around. All right, so I'll demonstrate a little bit here so that you can see what we're actually doing physically. But then what we're going to learn is how to do that on the flat pattern. Okay, and what it looks like and what the steps are. So that's my starting point. But say I don't like the look of that, I don't want a dart. So I'm holding it on the outside, right? The dart shape would not be on the outside of the garment if you sewed it in. It would be like on the inside, and it would be sewn up, and it'd be like that. Do you know? Does that make sense? But I'm just doing it on the outside so you can all see visually. So it's like as if we're on the inside of the garment. So I don't like it in that position. Maybe I want it up in the shoulder. So the idea is that you can move this around the place where you want it. So I could move it a very common place, and what we'll do is to put it in the underarm position. So the underarm position is probably the most common because it's the least seen. Your arm covers most of it, and it just sticks out here. So you don't see darts here or darts anywhere else. It's the most covered up, so it's the most common spot that you see a dart. Okay, so I'm going to do that. So I'm going to take this now and I'm going to maneuver it. I'm going to say, okay, I want this part to be kind of flat and sitting along the body. And then I want this part to be flat and sitting along the body. And now I can maneuver it here. Now this is kind of like also a sort of quickish demo, so it's not all sitting absolutely perfect. But do you get the idea there? How it's been moved around? Yeah? So we can choose to put it there. And we say, oh no, I don't want it there. I'd like to have it in the shoulder. I'm going to move it, or you can move it into the arm side. That's another common place that you see the dart. So I move it up there so it's flat there and it's fitting there. It's fitting there. And I'm going to go here to the arm side. It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like there'd be a seam there. So anywhere where you see this bit sticking out, you know, instead there'd just be a seam, but the rest of the body would fit, you know, so if you're making a dress or a top or whatever. So this is, just in case I forget to mention, this is for a fitted garment, obviously. This is for trying to fit the form. Okay, no, then I want it in the shoulder. So again, it's going to fit along here, it's going to fit along there, and I want to push all the excess or the dart allowance. So Winifred tends to call it the dart allowance. Sometimes I call it the shaping. It's essentially what are we doing? What are we doing to get the shaping, to get it shaped onto the stand? So now it's up here, okay? So, you know, again, it would look just like a line coming down there, you know? And then it fits nicely. And then we could say, okay, no, we want it in the neck. More unusual place, but you do see it. And I can go that way, so it is in the center of the neck. And again, I've got my shape, yeah? So now, if I want a underarm dart, I'm just going to show you what, just quickly and roughly, like it's not going to be perfect, but it gives you an idea of what draping is, just so that you see it. So I'm going to say underarm dart, because that's what we're going to do on the flat pattern after this. I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to say I want it in the underarm position. Now typically you leave a little bit of ease here. Remember the ease on our block? Like, so you'd want to see the way I can pinch in a little, like 1 centimeter. If you'll see what happens if I don't, it kind of wrinkles and doesn't sit well anyway. So you want to kind of leave just a little bit of ease. Okay. Just about hitting that point there. My bit of fabric is a tiny bit too small, and I probably should have press this. There's kind of a wrinkle in there that isn't helping me. Okay, and I want to just see that. How's that looking? So I'm going to get into place. Now, another reason why these mannequins are so expensive is because the seams are in exact position. So what you would do if you're draping them, and if you're draping on the stand, do not use any type of felt-tipped pen. Do you know what I mean? By that, on the stand, because it will go right through and you'll leave marks on to our mannequin. So nothing like a Sharpie or, you know, one of those kind of pens or anything like that. Because if I was to draw on that now, it could soak right through that fabric and into the next layer. There's a few marks on that one. I can see some of it. So try and just get a biro. Do you know those kind of ones? What are they? Ball tip. Is that what it is? Yeah. So I'm going to trace around this. So this, I'm a tiny bit short on the fabric. This line here, that's the seam for the neckline. So I can feel it with my finger nail, kind of, and I'm drawing along it. So now I'm drawing along the shoulder line. There's an actual seam on the mannequin that I am feeling along, and I'm drawing along with it. Okay? Now there isn't really much here. There's kind of the edge which you go along with, and then you have to kind of estimate when you come down to this spot here. So there are these kind of bits here that are on the mannequins or the stands, but they don't really represent the armhole shape. Like our arm doesn't stick out like that, it goes down, and you need more space underneath it typically. You need to like ease. So, you know, you need to come down underneath that. All right. And again, we're not getting into detail here. I'm just giving you a very brief outline of a quick introduction to kind of draping without going into And now I'm going to draw in the shape of the dart. And if I put it down, so if I say I want the excess of the dart, which is this, to sit down under, you know, when it's like I'm working on the side, I'm just gonna also trace through, that way it would sit. Okay, I traced everything. And then if this is coming down past the waistline, just coming down. Okay, so now that's that. Yeah. Actually, when you're working with it, if you're working with it properly, it's always better to, you know, remove the extra fabric, because it just sits flatter on the mannequin. Okay, so if I take this off now. Do you see what I have now? So if I put it back to being in a flat position, this is the shape. That's the neck, the shoulder, the armhole, and then the dart is in the underarm position, and there we have our waist and our side seam. Yeah? Okay. So that's what it's like in 2 dimensions. Then I take that and I go, okay, that is my pattern. That's a draped pattern. All right, so then you place that on top of paper and you trace around it and you get your block. All right, but we formed the block in a different way. We did it by mathematical calculations and we got our block. This is the one we're going to create. So I showed you how to do it on the stand from there over to here, and now we're going to do it on the flat. You've traced over your bodice block, that's the front of the female form, and we're going to maneuver the dart from the waist position here into the underarm dart position. So again, we could choose any position here that we want, and what might be nice is that you do a couple of them. Easy. By the way, the page in Winifred Aldrich's book that corresponds to this is page 84. First I'm going to just do one into from the neckline, okay? Well, I want the dart here. So I'm going to choose my position. So you don't even have to measure or anything. If you want something like exactly the center of the shoulder, you could measure and find that point. But other than that, you can just go, I want it there, I want it there, you know. You can just, so there isn't measurements involved in this. So I take my, I draw a line straight down to the bust point, and that is what we call a cutting line, so I put a scissors on it. So what I do then is I trace that off. So I've already done that. So I trace that off into the neck position, and then I cut out this, which I didn't even cut out fully, but I cut all around it. And then I cut down my cutting line here. And then when I close over my dart shape, so I crease it over and close it right over, and then this opens out, and the dart is now in the neck position. Okay? So that's like that diagram in the PowerPoint where it's in the neck and it now looks like that. So that is going into the neck, right? So I'll do one more right the way through, and then you guys can start, and like that, maybe try and do a couple of them. So I'm going to go underarm. Again, I could just go where I want. I could just look at it and draw it, or I could measure if I want. You know, you might find as a designer, oh, I always like it when they're 6 centimeters down or 7 or something like that. So typically, well, I'm going to go 7 down. That's full scale. So it's common to be around 5 to 7 centimeters down. So the green line is now going to be the line on the construction for the underarm dart. Okay, so I'm going to get a piece of paper, trace it off and cut and close. And each time you trace, you always trace any notches that are there, and you always write center front line on. And I'm going to draw in this. So now I have this, and I'm cutting in here, like that. And again, in terms of the closing of the dart, or the dart excess or the shaping, I usually crease one side of the dart carefully. Okay, and then I'm going to close it over onto the other side of the dart, like that. And when I crease it down there, we can see. And I'll just, for the sake of a visual, I'll colour that in, and you can do that too so that you can see very easily. That is now the space where the dart is, and this is now gone. Okay, and when we trace off for our pattern piece, which I'll do in a minute, we'll trace around the outside edge, and we won't draw in the line, you know, that was closed over. We only draw in our dart. Now the one last thing with dart on the female form, typically you pull the dart back, the point, the apex, which is the pointy bit, back a bit from the bust point. Otherwise it's very, very pointy. What you want to do is have it be balanced, so you find the center of the dart. So I'm finding the center of the opening. Oh, okay. And I draw a line down the center, you know, or maybe even a dotted line, something like that. And then I'm going to measure back 2 centimeters along that line and draw in a new shorter dart. I'm going to then trace this off. So what you'll do is you'll stick that down, you'll glue that down onto this, your piece of paper, and then we'll do a final trace off where we'll trace right the way around this. We'll trace only what's necessary, so our center front line, the outside edge, don't forget our any notches, and we'll go to the shorter dart. Okay, and a reminder about labeling. So a couple of things. So I haven't put any seam allowance along the center front line, but I put seam allowance up and around all these other edges, and I've come in and out on with seam allowance on the dart. So if the dart is very big, I tend to put seam allowance on it, rather than if it's smaller, you just leave it as a, you know, a shape that you fold over. But if it's big, you don't want this amount of fabric being folded over, so you can put it in like seam allowance, come down, seam allowance at the bottom. And then I've got my 4 lines for my labeling. So my name, the garment this belongs to, so I'm just going to call it the underarm dart. Underarm dart bodice. but typically that would be the name of the dress or the blouse or the shirt or whatever. And then this is the front. So which part of the garment, this is the front, or the front bodice. And you might want to put PP there. I put front bodice pattern piece so that you can remember this is a pattern piece, not a construction. If that's helpful for you, you can put that in. And then how many are we cutting? And I am cutting 1 to the fold. Okay, so that's our construction step 1. This is construction step 2. And that's our final trace off or our pattern piece with the seam allowance all around the labeling. And then this can get physically cut right out as well.